am I good at video games? I've been playing them for over 20 years, but when my friend told me that I could use the fact that I was good at video games to advertise my channel and make it stand out from other ones, I didn't really believe them. After all, back in college, I used to play Smash Bros, a competitive, high skill ceiling game. And when I did, every week I would go to the local weekly tournament. And every week, I would get my teeth kicked in. So I've been thinking about this question a lot recently, and I've been wondering, can I be good at video games? I honestly don't know. So in order to find out, I am going to play this game. It's called Pumpkin Jack, and I have played through it one time before on my Halloween stream in 2021, and I remember almost nothing about the gameplay and how it works, really. So for most purposes, I'm starting this with a fresh eye on things. Now, my question is this. If I enjoy it, if I play it just as I did back then 2 years ago, but instead this time I try to be very skilled and I try not to die and I try to beat the game as quickly as possible, will I have a better time? And will I have fewer deaths than I did last time? So the time to beat is 6 hours up there in the top right, and the deaths to beat is 53 down there in the bottom left. So without further ado, let's begin. I'm hoping as well to give a recap of this game, because I don't remember exactly how good it is or not, and I'm curious to see how I feel about it. But before I dive exactly into what this game is all about, I need to talk about our protagonist, Stingy Jack. The game doesn't tell you this at all, but Stingy Jack is, well, I wouldn't call him a folk hero, but he is a protagonist in a folk tale. The long and short of it was that he was a super clever trickster who even got the devil himself to promise to never take his soul. But it turns out what he had in cleverness, he lacked in wisdom, because when his time came, he went to heaven, but they turned him away because he was such a renowned swindler. And of course, the devil kept his end of the bargain, so he couldn't get into hell either. So now that he couldn't get accepted into the afterlife, his soul was cursed to wander the earth for eternity. So as the story goes, the devil gave him a coal in order to light his way in his endless wanderings. And in order to hold that coal, Jack made a lantern out of a nearby vegetable that he found. And that vegetable was, you guessed it, a turnip. So yeah, the OG Jack-o'-the-lantern originally held a turnip jack-o'-lantern. It wasn't until Halloween traditions came to America that they started using pumpkins instead of turnips because it worked better, and that is a decision which I very much agree with. So that's where the story starts off. The great Arkansas Kingdom is enjoying a marvelous era of peace, and the devil finds that so very boring. He unleashes the curse of the Eternal Night, which summons monsters to basically kill everyone. Pretty extreme if you ask me, but okay. The citizens of the kingdom call upon the wizard, a champion who is smart enough to break the curse, to find a solution. The devil hears this news and decides to make a champion of his own in, you guessed it, Stingy Jack. He tracks down his soul, stuffs it into a pumpkin-headed body, and makes him a deal. Kill the wizard, and he'll let Jack's soul finally pass into the afterlife. And so, our journey begins. An annoying owl serves as the conduit for tutorial, and soon Jack commissions the help of a crow in exchange for promising to kill the scarecrow that has been terrorizing him and his friends. This game is very basic. The main method of gameplay revolves around platforming and fighting enemies. Platforming just involves moving and a double jump. It is worth noting that both jumps can start in the air, but other than that, it's very basic and the controls feel a little floaty. Sometimes it's hard to land on what you're aiming at, and maneuvering the camera around during platforming and fighting is kind of cumbersome. As for fighting, you get a weapon at the start of the game and at the end of every chapter. There's not much distinguishing them apart, but all of them have a standard combo, an attack that's available coming out of a dodge roll, and a dive attack you can use after a double jump. The dodge roll is mapped to A while attack is Y, which makes it awkward to switch between the two. The crow also can be used to target enemies where he'll do a little damage. He's more useful for preventing certain enemy projectiles from being sent towards you. There are also little minigame type modes like riding a minecart and avoiding obstacles, or controlling Jack's disembodied head to solve little puzzles. Heading on, I know I said I would be going try-hard mode this time, but the first enemies were pieces of cake. It's conveniently explained that all the monsters aren't very sharp and will attack anything that moves, and they're like a dime 100, so you can kill them all you want. So, that's where the enemies come from. So conveniently, you have a lot of enemies to fight, even where you shouldn't really have any enemies to fight. Anyway, I made my way through a barn and accidentally burned it to the ground on the way, and then killed the Scarecrow, awarding me with a spear. Chapter 2 brings Jack to the mines, where his goal is to hunt down an amulet that he's pretty sure that the wizard wants. In order to get where I needed to go, I hopped in a minecart for one of those minigames I mentioned earlier.
Although, to be fair, I want to say this is like one of those like die really easy things. Yep.
You know, maybe I could have seen that coming earlier, but I don't know. I think that's kind of BS. Anyway, my first death is my first opportunity to try to be better at video games. Typically, I just say darn and try again without thinking much of it. But since I'm trying to get better, I'm going to keep this surprise in mind. And sure enough, it didn't kill me the next time because I was prepared for it. I also used my gamer brain to realize a better strategy.
Should I just be spamming L? Like, is there no reason not to?
Continuing on, I fell victim to the floaty physics. Oops. It was here the death started trickling a bit more. By the time I got to the boss of the chapter, I had racked up 4. The penalties for dying weren't that severe, so I found myself kind of just not caring a little bit, which is precisely the kind of habit I need to not fall into if I want to be quote-unquote skilled at games. The boss fight went fine though. A spirit that was guarding the ancient amulet took issue that I was there, so he challenged me to a fight, and I killed him. But it turns out that the wizard was also there, and used Jack as a distraction to snag the amulet and run away. Oh, and also an unrelated talking sword showed up and offered to teach Jack how to kill people better. Following the wizard's trail leads us to the swamps of Chapter 3, where death number 5 comes at the hands of a misjudged jump. We soon meet a ghostly merchant who I did not talk to, and I came to my second big-brained gamer revelation. There's a powerful move Jack can use with any weapon after double jumping, in which Jack hovers in the air for a second and then crashes down on any enemies below. The problem is that if they have any form of projectiles, Jack is prone to getting hit and taking damage. So, accordingly, as cool as this move is, it kind of sucks. That's another problem I noticed I have. I'll do things that look cool or feel good in a game without really caring if they actually help me win, which is definitely a habit that I'll need to break if I want to get better. Chapter 3 is kind of dumb. The basic premise is that in return for getting mushrooms for his witch of a wife, she'll tell me all about the wizard and his weaknesses. I died a lot, but it didn't feel like it was because I wasn't good enough at the game. One source of deaths was a ferry ride in which the boat turns over, and it took a few times to figure out how to navigate around its quirks and just jump onto the other side and not die. Plus, there was another part where you had to ride a horse and dodge obstacles, but the camera moved in such a way that made it hard to figure out where you were actually going. But after doing all this to appease that witch, it turns out she doesn't actually know the wizard, and she just wants to eat Jack's pumpkin head because she and her husband are vegans and it's hard to get soul in their diet. And since Jack isn't technically alive, it doesn't count as killing something to eat it. Anyway, killed them and picked up my next weapon, which is a lovely shotgun. 19 deaths. Next. And before we go into Chapter 4, it turns out that Chapter 3 has literally no bearing on the story, and even if Jack breaks the fourth wall and complains about being a plot contrivance, it feels pretty weak since there are only 6 chapters in total. So with literally no clue on where the wizard is, Pumpkin Jack just kind of wanders into a war-torn city, fighting desperately to keep the monsters subdued. So in the city of Chapter 4, I only died once. Things were pretty straightforward. The wizard warned me that I was in human territory now, and they would have a better shot at killing me. They didn't. It's revealed that he's kind of a jerk, as he talks about looking forward to studying how Jack kills humans in order to figure out how to counter him. It was in this chapter I did another pro gamer move. I switched dodge from A to ZR via the button remapping screen on the Switch in order to be able to more easily switch between pressing Y to attack and ZR to dodge roll. There's not much to show in this chapter except how I kept getting backtracked at the start, or how I died to this bogus kart racing game where the opponents can just speed ahead of you whenever they want. I guess the game felt bad about that, however, because the next iteration of the game literally had no opponents show up. So I just kind of got to the finish for free. The end of the level showed me squaring off against the mighty Door, who could smell the human on Jack, and they decided to fight because, I don't know, Jack can't back down from a challenge, I guess. Killed him, got a free scythe, got out. Chapter 5 took me to a cemetery where Jack was, quote-unquote, sure to find the key to tracking down the conniving wizard, which, again, I don't know why, but whatever. Plot contrivances, I guess. This chapter saw me running errands for a gravekeeper, and then I met the Architect of Hell, who tasked me with freeing the 7 deadly sins in order to harvest their power to create a portal to follow the wizard, who conveniently did indeed happen to toddle through here and make a portal of himself. So anyway, 7 broken seals and 2 deaths later, the architect summons me a portal to the north and gives me a spell that summons copies of my crow buddy to fight for me. Chapter 6 was as north as you can get, the North Pole. And what jolly old elf had a workshop standing in my way? Why, none other than Santa Claus. So, after blowing up Santa's workshop and killing him, twice, I died one time and made my way to the final boss battle with 23 deaths. Jumping through the portal led me to the wizard's tower, where a frustrated wizard was found unable to unlock the powers of the Amulet of Final Ember. It's revealed that a pure soul is needed to unlock the power, and if a soul like the wizard's, who has dedicated himself to research to help the human race, doesn't count, maybe it literally means a pure soul that has no human body, like Jack's. So we fight, I die once, win the next time, close out the game with 24 deaths, hooray! Wrapping things up, Jack gets the amulet. It does indeed fuse with his quote-unquote pure soul, and he becomes an all-powerful being. Roll the credits. Final time, 3 hours, 59 minutes, 35 seconds, and 77 milliseconds. I win. As an aside, I'd like to go back to this channel's roots and do a little mini review of the game. So would I recommend Pumpkin Jack? No. Hopefully my summary gave you an idea as to why, but unless you're a Halloween or pumpkin fanatic like myself, there's really nothing in this game that I could specifically recommend to anyone. There's nothing particularly egregious about this game, but on the same side of that token, there's nothing it really excels at. It's the very definition of a middle-of-the-road 5 out of 10 game. So, back to the main point of the video, was I successful in showing that I was skilled at video games, given that I was trying to put my nose to the grindstone? Well, maybe. I did get fewer deaths and a faster time, but that was after playing the game once already, and this time I wasn't trying to go out of my way to find collectibles and stuff, so like, I don't know if that's the best of indicators. But I did come to a realization as to why I think that maybe I'm not so good at games. And I think the best way to explain my thought process is by bringing up this old Mario Kart stream I did with my viewers once upon a time. So I'd like you to take a look at the performance of Baby Daisy and the orange beanied me in this screenshot and compare it with this screenshot, and I want you to tell me who you think is a better Mario Kart player. Clearly, the better player is Baby Daisy. Looks like she had a rough go of it here, but there's no way she'd be able to get this far ahead in the first lap, I might add, without being a pro at the game. But of course, there's some information that I'm not telling you. This screenshot depicts a typical race on Cheeseland, but this screenshot depicts a typical race on any other track in the game. The thing was, Baby Daisy was practicing to get the world record time trial on Cheeseland. They had gone online, looked up the world record run, researched strategies, and found what little unintuitive shortcuts people had found to shave off milliseconds from their time. However, despite all this, on any other track, I was better at making the turns, I was wiser with using my items, and overall, I think I was the better player. So there's kind of the point. You can only get so good at a game before you hit like a plateau. And if you want to climb past this plateau, really the only way to do that is to take a step back and look at the game really analytically. Whether that be look up strategies online or try to figure them out yourselves by rigorous experimentation in-game. Then you need to put the intentional time in to practice those little techniques until slowly but surely you can push past that plateau. The problem is, it's the law of diminishing marginal returns. The better and better you get, the more and more time you have to put in if you want to get even slightly better. And to me, most of the time, that is not worth it. And if you take a look at Smash Bros, the reason why I was losing so much wasn't because I was necessarily being outskilled. There were definitely times where I was. But other people had taken the time to sit down and do the combos. So they knew that if they get this one hidden and then input this specific practiced set of inputs, they'll get 2 more hits for free, whereas I was fighting for every hit individually. So when I found out what I would need to do to get better and what it would involve, I chose to quit. Accordingly, I figured out that in Pumpkin Jack, I would probably have a much easier time if I fiddled around and experimented with all the different weapons and combos and damage and all that good stuff to figure out exactly what the optimal strategy was to play through the game. But since I was still playing through the game relatively painlessly, I didn't really care about that. And for me, that happens with a lot of games. I just don't want to put in the effort to grind out that little bit to get to that upper 1%. If you're one of those people that loves that, great. I am not. So, to answer the overarching question, am I good at video games? Well, if you define someone who is good at video games as someone who is better than the average video game enjoyer at picking up and being relatively decent at a new game, then yes, I am good at video games. But if your definition involves being the top 1%, 0.5%, whatever, of all players in a competitive setting, then no, I am not good at video games. So, I hope that was insightful. As always, if you have any feedback for me, feel free to let me know in the comments below or on any of my social media. I especially recommend my Twitch. All of the game footage you saw in this video was streamed there initially. But with that, I wish you a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time. Bye!